The Boruto anime over the past few years has been a mess, and this is coming from a Boruto fan, but I just have to be honest. It has some pretty high highs and some unforgettable lows. However, what has stayed consistent throughout this entire time, and in my opinion has gradually improved, has been the manga. We can see this ever since the Omnipotence arc, where Boruto as a series, coming from the manga perspective, reached another level. In today's video, we'll be breaking down why that is the case. We all know about the filler / anime canon, the problems that a lot of people have with it, and to be fair, Boruto did not have the best start as an anime, as it didn't hit home with a lot of the older fans. However, everybody knows these talking points. What we'll be diving deep on is comparing the most recent arc of the anime and that of the manga. And this is the Code arc, comparing the anime's Code arc to the manga. As usually when Boruto adapts canon material from the manga, the reception is usually good. But for the Code arc, it was a complete disaster that left a lot of lovers of the series completely disappointed, and this definitely has to change when Boruto comes back. The first main thing that we have to talk about is the frames, and we'll address it. The animation in the Code arc. We all expected the animation in that arc to be amazing, but even in the first episode, I knew things were not going right. Especially when we check Code's fight versus Boru's guards. We can see in some of the animations, I'll be showing frames as I can't show all the animation due to copyright. But in some of the frames when Code was walking in, we could clearly see that this wasn't the stellar animation that we were quite used to getting. And if you compare it to the manga, you would see that the manga had a lot more contrast. And in my opinion, in general, the anime has a lot easier of a time to make material that is shown in the anime be better than the manga. Because think about it, the anime has the advantage of sound, it has the advantage of being able to show animations, but on the manga, you can only see it and read it side by side. You don't get that chance of seeing flow or even hearing these sound effects. And alongside the fact that the anime has the OSTs, the music, that makes you feel more immersed, it was quite disappointing, especially in the first fight that we see Code have, that the animation wasn't really up to par. If you compare it to Kawaki's first introduction, you would see that it is light and day, where the anime did go completely overboard and we saw some stellar animations that honestly really make Kawaki stand out as a character, but for Code, it wasn't really the same. Him walking in the snow, the animations look kinda junky, and honestly, I prefer this fight in the manga. We do see more material being shown to us when it comes to the anime, which I like to see, especially in fights, as the fight in the Boruto manga, at least at this point in the series, I felt like they were kind of short, so I always like when the anime expands on it, but in this case, I didn't really like it. Again, it was animation that maybe for other series you wouldn't really complain, but for Boruto has a standard, or at least the Naruto series in general, they have the best fights of all time, if we're simply honest, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree. Momoshiki versus Sasuke and Naruto, Boruto, in my opinion, with that fight, has the best fight of all time. And to see the lows like the ones we saw in the Code arc, it was quite disappointing, and I personally believe that nobody truly expected it. The Boruto art, it just looked very bland. The animation, Code's claw marks, they don't really hit. It really lacks contrast with the background and everything, and it was honestly disappointing. And that's just simply the Code fight. And I'm not going to deny this fact that we had certain parts, like when Ida is introduced, where we see this stellar animation and the music complements it. Everything was perfect, but we can clearly see that there are really big inconsistencies. And if it was only, okay, one episode, no, this was throughout multiple different episodes where we see 3 minutes of good animation and then the rest of the episode is really lackluster. And just with that Code fight, if I had to pick which one I enjoyed more, which one has better contrast, I would definitely go with the fights in the manga. And in my opinion, anime fights should definitely be better than the ones in the manga. That's just my opinion. And yeah, we all know this one here. I had to include it at some point in this video. It did go absolutely crazy and it was a meme for quite some time. But yeah, Naruto Goblin, it clearly just shows the fact that one, Naruto looks completely off here. He does look like a goblin, but I don't know how you could look at this and be part of the animation group and not see that there's a problem. There were a lot of scheduling issues when it comes to Boruto, exactly, and I'm very surprised that they kept going with it for so long with all these animation issues. And to me, they do filler for a reason, or anime canon as we like to call it. So if the time part of filler is to ensure that we give the manga a lot of time to pass through so we can get more manga content, but we're also giving them kind of a break when it comes to the canon material that they have to actually showcase. So why are we getting animation that really isn't up to par when it's time to adapt the canon material? That's my biggest problem. It's cool if you have the anime canon, you can skip it, but don't mess up the canon material due to terrible scheduling if we're seeing anime canon and filler week after week. And just comparing it to the manga, it is night and day. The manga has this contrast, the manga looks sharp, and in my opinion, it's just another instance of the manga doing a lot better. When it also comes to the fight between Boruto versus Kawaki, when they're practicing and going through this training session, it wasn't as bad at the moments, but in my opinion, the battle is also a lot better in the manga. It's just certain animations, the flow, it's mostly the flow. We can look at these frames, and I feel like looking at frames isn't the most fair thing to do personally, but that's the only way I can really show it to you guys. But if you go back and you watch some of these fights, you will see that it looks clunky, the animation lacks a lot of flow, and when you compare it to the manga, you don't have that. Even though you are simply reading something page by page, the flow is a lot better, and I prefer this fight in the manga a lot more. There are multiple instances where frames just simply don't look good in the anime, which I believe would be a lot easier since you got the color, you got the animation that could flow. And to be 100% honest, what truly disappointed me was the code fight between Boruto and Code, where this was a very big moment in my opinion to showcase Boruto as this the person who's truly going to be the main character, as we have Naruto and Sasuke get nerfed in the previous arc, and now we're seeing Boruto and Kawaki take the main stage. And in Boruto's real first almost solo fight that we could have gotten with a major villain, but the animation that we see showcased is simply not up to par. We have multiple instances even prior to this fight where the manga just does the animations a lot better, like Code trash talking Kawaki. I liked it a lot more in the manga. But just looking at Boruto, it just looks bland. I don't know, I just didn't like the color palette that we have, and we'll go back to discuss the good parts, definitely. But looking at the entirety, I didn't like it at all. I felt like the manga did a lot better in showcasing Boruto's powers. It looked a lot cooler in the manga, and that was my biggest problem. This is Boruto's first real solo fight versus a major villain, and we're seeing that Boruto isn't really looking all that cool. I feel like they could have done a lot more, maybe added certain scenes, but it's just the flow. Boruto in the Code arc, it really lacked that flow. So that's basically the section on frames and animations, as it really wasn't consistent. There were definitely highs when it comes to Ida's introduction, but the lows were really bad, and they were bad at key moments. I don't really care that the animation, like Goblin Naruto, like it was a meme, but I don't really care about the animation when it comes to talking. But when it comes to fights, Boruto series, it has a standard, and that standard was not kept up. And in general, when it came to the color palette that we're having, I didn't like it quite a lot. I expected a lot more, especially when it comes to the fighting. But another thing that I really didn't like was True Essence Karma. True Essence Karma Boruto was a complete failure. The fight was a little bit better than what we had seen previously, but the complete failure comes with Boruto's design. Why do we have a Boruto who still has version 1 karma? In the manga, we saw Boruto who had this version 2 karma look, where he looks exactly like Momoshiki when he uses the karma, and that's how we can tell that Boruto is using True Essence Karma, which is a very important part narratively. Now the anime people might start to confuse version 1 karma of Boruto to that of version 2, which is clearly not the case. And I really don't know what the reason was for this. In my opinion, I don't know what exactly they were trying to achieve, but they simply decided to change it from the manga, and there is no real apparent reason for that being the case, and it honestly just left me quite disappointed. And another major point in that, changes that were simply not needed and could make some confusion in the series, is the fact that we see when Shikamaru and Naruto appear, we have Shikamaru who ends up using shadow paralysis on Boruto. And in the anime, we see that Momoshiki is not capable of absorbing it, that Shikamaru himself notes that he won't be capable of absorbing this shadow paralysis. And why is that the case? Isn't Momoshiki's karma supposed to allow him to absorb ninjutsu, as we saw him do previously in the anime, versus Shikamaru himself? Why is this case quite different? And if you could say, oh, in the manga it was the same thing, then I would say, okay, like this is maybe Ikimoto's fault, but this is clearly an animation choice, because we have in the manga that in that actual scene, Momoshiki ends up absorbing Shikamaru's ninjutsu. What ends up happening in the anime instead is that Shikamaru tries to strangle Momoshiki, and then the shadow paralysis just breaks, showcasing perhaps the improvement in physical strength that Momoshiki has when he's controlling Boruto's body. But they first retconned the manga by saying that Momoshiki could not absorb the shadow paralysis, which in the anime he has been shown to be able to do, and in the manga he has been shown to be able to do in that exact scene. So what exactly was the purpose of having Momoshiki not absorb it? Just to showcase the physical strength? I don't think it was a retcon that was needed, and it doesn't make the most sense in my personal opinion. But when it comes to Borushiki versus Kawaki, this was the highest high of the Code arc, and in certain instances I could say that they did it justice, but in my personal opinion there were a few flaws in that fight too. The main flaw is the fact that we see them reusing the Sasuke versus Naruto fight animation sequence, and I don't really understand the purpose of it. Not only are these two different characters completely, so it doesn't make any sense for them to do so, but for Kawaki to be the one to initiate it, somebody who really just started using ninjutsu, I don't understand the purpose. And the reason why I believe that this is the case is simply due to a lack of time. They had to add certain animations, they didn't have the time necessary to complete this, and it definitely comes down to poor scheduling, which really showcases the entire arc in itself. Bad scheduling really led to everything. And in my personal opinions, when you compare this to Baryon Naruto versus Ishiki, where we had Naruto who used a similar that he used in the past when we had Naruto versus Sasuke part 1, I think that's fine. That's a decent way to pay homage, due to the simple fact that, okay, this is Naruto's fighting technique, so it makes sense that he is capable of doing it versus another opponent. But to have Borushiki and Kawaki, two people who are not really part of this ninja system in my personal opinion, and we have them use a similar sequence to that of Naruto and Sasuke in another fight, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't really see the correlation, and it just comes down to a level of bad scheduling where they're just trying to find different clips to fill in the time, and it wasn't something I liked in the fight, and personally I felt like they could have done a lot better. But one of my biggest gripes was the fact of the color palette. The color palette of the characters, it was not up to par, and we do end up going to episodes like 293, not even the entire episode itself, but the end, we see a color palette that actually gives the series justice. Why does Boruto have so many different looks to it? I understand when there's different animations, but let's take a series like One Piece. One Piece changes its animations, but it is at least consistent throughout the entire arc, where we have this set color palette or look. Maybe in different episodes the animation is definitely not as smooth, but we see a similar color palette. But in the Code arc, which didn't even have that many episodes, we saw at least 3 different sorts of color palettes, and it's honestly disappointing to see, because we see moments of potential and then we see moments that are just terrible. And this lack of consistency, after going to multiple different filler arcs and multiple different anime canon arcs that we just had to endure, I guess, and some of them were pretty decent, we at least expect when the canon material is ready to be animated that we have a level of consistency, that the fights that we see in the manga are better in the anime simply due to the fact that they kind of have to be. They kind of had to look better, at least some of these fights. I would say that the Borushiki fight is slightly better in the anime due to the simple fact that we have these added sequences, and I really like the flying scene of Borushiki. That was absolutely peak, and it is good. And I'm not gonna say that the fight is bad. If it was any other series, I would say that, oh yeah, this is peak. But the Naruto and Boruto series has a standard. We expect a lot better, and it's definitely not fair to the animators, the scheduling that they have to go through, as this is definitely a topic of scheduling, but to Studio Pierrot as a whole, they absolutely failed the Boruto fans, and it was something I was quite disappointed in, and it is why you should be reading the manga. The manga is a lot more consistent. Yes, there are times where Ikimoto maybe doesn't draw a character in the best light, but that's a once in a blue moon thing. Ikimoto is somebody who has improved over the years. But obviously we want to watch our Boruto anime, and I do believe that there is hope when it comes to the Boruto series. We're not seeing the Boruto series right now. It is on hiatus for a reason. It is being worked on, this time to likely come back seasonal. And if you want to understand what changes we're going to see in Boruto when it is a seasonal anime and how it could really improve the series as a whole, make sure to watch this video right here.